We're good.
We're good?
Yep.
All right. All right, so let's get started. Way too much longer. Welcome to, what number is this, Vince?
Number, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter?
End of the year special.
Welcome to the, oh yeah, there we go, the last Mastery Monday of the year. How about that? My name is Jax. For those of you who haven't met me, I've started a couple companies. I've been playing poker for 13 years now, but playing seriously and studying for about 7 to 8 years. And I think it's a perfect time to talk about a little bit of exploitative play. So exploit on the table right after Vince did 3 lessons of GTO play. I think it's a good balance. GTO is a good foundation for people to have. You know, it's really good to understand what ranges are, in what position you should be opening, et cetera, but when you're applying that in live poker, sometimes, more often than not, it doesn't work because the players are not playing GTO. You have a lot of different types of players. You have new players, beginner players, professional players, so you really have to kind of adjust to the player type that you're playing with in these live tournaments. So a couple of things we'll talk about today is what is exploitative play, identify a couple types of players and archetypes with just some simple exploits you can kind of apply generally. We'll talk about bet sizing as an exploit, and then exploitative play in tournaments, so taking those lessons and kind of applying it in tournaments. And you can always stop me at any time, ask questions. If you don't agree, you can always shout out. So what is exploitative play? So essentially what it is just adjusting your strategy to directly punish your opponent's mistakes and patterns. So it really requires you to be observant of the players at the table, for you to be able to pounce on those mistakes and those patterns, because typically players do have patterns and it's up to you to kind of identify those patterns. Some core ideas would be, it deviates from that balanced or GTO play that Vince was talking about. You really have to apply some concepts that might be anti-GTO or not the best theoretical play, but it works in live poker depending on the opponent you're facing. It relies a lot on reads, so live tells, tendencies, and general population leaks. And it could be higher EV if opponents that you're playing with don't adjust back. So that's a really important thing as well. Some common beginner leaks are calling too much. I think everybody's kind of seen this when they played live, and they've done it probably themselves. I've done it. Folding too much to aggression, betting patterns, and also which equal to face-up hands. So a lot of new players, common mistakes is they have betting patterns that you can kind of, it's repetitive, and if you catch on to it, you'll know, oh, this is a strong hand they're playing, this is a weak hand, they're on a draw, etc. So a simple example would be, opponent folds 80% to continuation bets, so that's a bet that's after the flop has come up. And a simple exploit is just continuation bet wider than the correct theoretical amount. Does that make sense? All right, so we'll have a little multiple choice. Your opponent calls pre-flop too wide and folds too often on the flop. What is the best exploit? You take a look. Bluff less and check more. Bluff more frequently on the flop. Only value bet strong hands. Switch to GTO ranges. B? Why do you think B?
B? Well, if they're calling wide pre-flop and folding, then you can just raise free every hand you have, and you know that they're going to fold too frequently, and then you just take it down there.
Yep, exactly. So a lot of the times in live tournaments, this applies, especially when you have a lot of beginners. When they're calling too wide, so that they don't take a lot of aggressive action, they're calling your opens instead of 3-betting you. And you also see them fold a lot on the flop. So even in early position, they open, they call, somebody bets, they fold. You can abuse that a lot. So if you catch those easy patterns with those type of players, really apply that and just apply a lot of aggression. This is a couple more open-ended questions. So what's a common mistake you see at those states that you guys observe? So exactly, not taking the initiative early on. Right? A lot of pre-flop, a lot of weaker players tend to be non-aggressive pre-flop. That's a good one. Patrick, what do you think?
Just from a recent experience, I think I've seen, like the pot was like $30, and the guy just rips it all in. That just to me is like, what? That's a bluff, and then he shows the bluff at the end, and it's just like, we know you're bluffing, but I think like sizing,
Mm-hmm.
I think is just from what I've seen.
100%. Yeah. So we'll talk a bit about kind of player archetypes, like those maniac plays, and how you kind of capitalize that as well. Anybody else? Common mistakes?
Yeah, limping block.
Limping again. So you kind of always want to take the initiative. So that always means being the aggressor. So very rarely do you want to limp. There is a limping strategy you can apply late in the tournament. Usually, like heads up, there are limping strategies there, but it's very rare early on that you have any limping strategy. So always try to take the initiative and be aggressive. And the second one, why is exploiting beginners often more profitable than playing perfectly? That's pretty self-explanatory. So that's kind of the GTO, right? If you keep applying GTO to beginners, you actually could be losing because they're not playing GTO theory, right? They're not opening those ranges that you think they should be in those positions. So exploit the beginners a lot more, and you'll see those tendencies. This is what kind of Patrick was talking about earlier. So identifying player types. So there's a few, common buckets you can always put people into. So you have the first one, so they're the tags, right? The tight and aggressive players. They're tighter pre-flop ranges. They take initiative, right? So they don't limp ever. And they take aggressive action, so they're generally 3-betting if they're getting in the pot and someone's open. Overall, they're usually more disciplined, they're selective in their hands, and they're pressure oriented. So if you see someone playing like that, you can kind of tag them generally as a tight and aggressive player. So adjust to that play as you will. There's a few of the people in the club who are quite tags, they're big tags here. Second one is fun to play against, lags, loose and aggressive. These ones, some people call them calling stations. I like to tag them as ATMs on DG because they play a much wider range pre-flop, a very wide range of starting hands. They like to kind of bingo. They're highly aggressive. So when they're in the pot, they have a lot of range. They'll bet and they'll play frequently. They'll bet and raise frequently. Overall, they're unpredictable, they're pressure heavy, they're harder to play against, but exploitative player can be very profitable. So if you notice these tendencies, usually they can be the maniac, so that's kind of what Patrick was saying. That guy who just jams all in on the flop. If you have a set there, you've just made all the money back, right? Then you have kind of the elusive passive ATM players. They play way too many hands with no aggression. They don't really take initiative, so that's what Jennifer was saying earlier. They're the ones who usually limp a lot. They limp into the pot. They're harder to bluff because they'll kind of just call you down with bottom pair. But easy to get value when you have it. So when you have top pair, you know that they're calling really wide and light. Just value higher, right? Make those value bets a lot larger than you would against someone else. Then you have kind of the knit style. They overflow, they overfold. So your exploit over there is you kind of bluff more. So they're kind of like old man coffee style. You know that they play aces, kings, and ace king. I think everybody's been to casinos. I think everyone's been to underground club, and you spot those players. They're very rarely in hands, and if they're in the hands, when they get to the river, they probably have it. So if you know what the nuts, generally fold against those folks. They play a few hands. They don't bet or raise too much. Folds often and only commits chips with very strong holdings, right? But they're very easy to play. Then you have kind of the maniacs, the cannons, the whales, the hyper-aggressive, loose and aggressive players. So these are the hyper lags. They play many hands. They bet and raise relentlessly just to put pressure if they want to. You've seen a lot of these guys at casinos especially, they're just splashing money around, they don't really care. They put pressure on you just to see what you're going to do. Those players can be annoying, but if you kind of find the right spots, you can make a lot of money off of these guys. And then you kind of have your ABC. So that's kind of your last one that I added in. These are the folks that they're predictable, you can tell what they're doing. They play very face up. Usually these players are open, their opening sizes tell you what they have. More skilled players, they'll open 2x, they'll keep the opening sizes consistent. But these guys, the ABCs, when they got aces, they're 4x, 5x, or ace king, they have a big type. Any other player types or archetypes that you guys have seen? Or comments on these folks? It's also important to notice how you play, right? So when you're taking a look at this, notice the patterns you do, and then start thinking about how you would adjust to yourself, because that's always important. Don't be stuck as a label, right? Because that's when people know how to exploit you. Because if you're too tight and aggressive, people kind of pick up on that, then they know how you play. Rule of thumb, if they call too much, value bet more. If they fold too much, we'll love more.
I would say, like, I've seen a player or a few friends of mine, they play super tight and they're not aggressive. I don't see it. I've seen that a few times.
Super tight and not aggressive could be nit. They're nits, right? They play a few hands, so they're super tight with the hands they play, but they don't bet or raise much.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So those are kind of the nit guys.
never mind.
All right, another one. Player never folds top pair, even on scary boards, so super wet boards. What adjustment should you make? Bluff more rivers, check strong hands, bet bigger for value, or stop betting altogether?
Bet bigger?
See?
Yeah.
Why?
If they're never well, top pair on a really wet board is often not always the best hand. So if they're having a hard time folding top pair, then if you have a mate hand, then you can extract a lot of value from top pairs.
Exactly, yeah. So that's exactly right. Bet bigger for value. You know, I think you've seen kind of those players very sticky, even with top pair, no kicker. They'll still call you down, or if they'll call someone else down, that's when you size up a lot. And this is good for cash games as well, and it applies for tournaments. Size up. So if you think, all right, I'll bet 80% pot against a normal person here, go over pot. Do 150% of the pot, because they'll pay you off. Because if they're going to pay you at 90, they're going to pay you at 100 or 120% of the pot, right? It really makes no difference for them. So when you see that, really adjust and abuse it, because it's very profitable. Now, which player type is easiest to exploit and why? So this is kind of just open-ended. There's no really right answer. It depends also on how you like to play. But I'm just curious, kind of open-ended.
It's probably Mania.
So I hear lag, I hear maniac. Yeah,
I'm gonna say loose passer. I feel like that's just very easy to play against. Just
Yeah.
value bet thin and fold to raises.
exactly. Yeah.
I would say nits as well. People that are very tight, you know, when they're in the hand, like you can size down the range and really look at the board and be like, okay, it doesn't seem like any of these cards hit their range, and then you can bet and get them off the pot with literally nothing.
Yep.
So
Sure.
I would say nits for sure.
They can overfold. Yeah. It's hard to get value from those guys though, right? Because if they miss or if they're on a draw even, maybe they want to pay you off.
Right.
Whereas
okay.
some other players who would want to pay you off, you can value that much higher than you could against a nit, right?
Right, if we're talking about like getting money or just taking the pot then and there, if you're talking about maximizing your EV, then yeah, definitely not a net because they won't give you that money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, it's kind of also depending on how you play, right? How you feel comfortable playing. If you're a tight and aggressive player, some styles of play you play better against, so maniacs are great for you because you know they'll pay you off. You can outplay them or you have the value of those hands. If you're more passive, if you're more loose, you want to see more hands, you know, adjust to that what you will. But it's always better to kind of be tight and aggressive. In tournaments is usually what I'm talking about. In cash games, these things are good for you to just tag players because that's when you know how to get value and when not to overbluff. Because that's what's key in cash games. And then what do you think the risk of mislabeling a player could be?
Lose money.
Lose money, yeah. Misplay, right? So it's kind of important to be observant. You know, early on, you might tag someone as an X, a tag, or a lag, but if they do something that goes against that theory, take note of that, right? It's all about being observant, honestly. And this is way more important in tournaments than it is in cash game. Cash games, you bust, you just add some more cash, it's kind of fun. But in tournaments, when you have one tournament life, especially if it's a freeze out, you know, really pay attention to these things. It's endurance at the end of the day. Tournaments take a long time. You know, even you play these turbo ones, they're 4 to 6 hours. So it's about endurance, about rest, and making sure that you kind of keep that level head, don't tilt too much, and just apply these player types, keep some notes. Every chip counts in a tournament, you know? think someone brought this up, bet sizing is an exploit. So most players, they don't defend correctly versus large bets, especially inexperienced players. They overcall small bets, right? And they overfold versus big bets. So you can kind of make some practical adjustments, value versus calling stations, bet larger, so 70 to 100% of the pot, what we said a little bit earlier on. Bluff versus nits. It's my brother giving me a call, it's okay. Bluffing versus nits, bet smaller but more often. And then versus scared, quote unquote scared players, overbet your polar hands, so value or bluff, like oversize your value when you're trying to get you paid off, and oversize your bluffs when you're having those bluff hands. So you have a strong hand against a player who doesn't like folding. What do you think the best sizing is? 25, 50, 75 to 100, or check to induce?
See?
See? 75 to 100%? I think I heard someone say 50%. You can do 50, but if they don't like folding, 75 to 100% is always the best option there. That's when you extract the most value, right? You've seen, it's kind of the same as the top pair idea. If you see these players and they just don't like folding, just value way high. Just keep going up. Don't be too scared against it. So why is bet sizing often more important than hand strength? This is an interesting question.
They don't know what's in your hand.
Yeah. And so that's kind of key of poker, right? That's why I think we like it so much. Unlike chess, where you see all the pieces and you know kind of what everyone's doing, everyone has their own hole cards, right? So it's always a mystery, right? So bet sizing, especially online, this applies a lot. You can really use bet sizing bluffs because they don't have any live tails. So bet sizing matters a lot more online than, it matters a lot live, but online there's also a special strategy on bet sizing too. Does anybody have any bet sizing strategies or have thought about bet sizing in the past as an exploit? Versus just like, oh, I have to bet 25% C-bet. Oh, I have to bet 75%, protect my, you know?
You like situational?
Mm-hmm.
Their strategy.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this applies a lot more online than it is in person, personally, just because it's a more important strategy online. We have more online players here or more live? Live? Who plays live more? The majority. Oh, okay, half I'd say, half. And then what do you think what mistakes do beginners make with sizing? Kind of gave it away with my answer to the left. Yeah.
I mean, they kind of just bet like the strength, depending on the strength of their hand, is the sizing that they use.
Yeah. So that's one that's like the ABC face-up players, right? When they have a great hand, they'll put a lot of money in. When they don't have a lot or they're scared, you can kind of tell. So abuse those patterns as much as you can. So this is kind of applying what we just discussed in tournament poker, which is I play a lot more in tournament than I do cash. I'd probably say 80% of the time it's tournament versus 20% that it's cash. And cash is PLO too, so don't even ask me about hold'em cash strategies. So in my cash games, stacks change constantly. Cash games you can always top up, you lose if you can, top up, have 200 big blinds again. ICM pressure affects decisions, so that's another piece of it that really matters when thinking about tournaments and exploitative play in tournaments, because that adds another layer of exploitation when you're thinking about the ICM, so when you're in the money. Players overvalue survival, so a lot of players, mostly a lot of beginners, they just want to make the bubble, right? They just want to get to the bubble, don't want to be the bubble boy and then get them in cash. You can abuse that a lot. Many opponents don't adjust properly, meaning if you play a lot of these large field tournaments, like 400, 500, 600 in Vegas, you start seeing a lot of the same players in these tournaments. Most of the time, they play the exact same than they did the day before. Even when they know they played against you, they play the exact same. So if you can capitalize on that and you adjust, you have that 1-2% edge over them, which is going to be profitable for you long run. So a couple of common exploitations you can do is like a short stack fear. Players who overfold near, as I was mentioning, the bubble or the pay jumps or even at final tables, you can really exploit that by stealing wider from late positions. So cut off, button, if you have a couple short stacks, you're near the bubble, open. King deuce, queen deuce, seven, it doesn't even, at that point it doesn't matter because you want to put pressure. They're most likely going to fold. You're going to win those blinds. They're going to keep chipping down, right? So those little bits of pressure for you win in the long run. How many times have you been like all in and you have just a couple blinds left and you spin it up and you win the tournament? It's very possible in tournaments, right? Stack size, so stack size awareness. 20 BBs, usually what you consider kind of a short stack. So that's like players are generally very tight. They're shoving most of their range if they're playing the hand. So you can kind of exploit that by applying a lot of pressure on short stacks, as I mentioned. You know, you can open wider on the button, and if they jam and you're super wide, you can just fold. It's very easy. You just lost 2 to 3 big blinds. For the mid stack, so that's kind of between the 24 and 40 big blind range. Common mistakes is fear of busting, so exploits is 3-bet, shove, or float more often, right? So if they're opening, 3-bet, be more aggressive, take the initiative. That's the thing in tournaments. You want to be the person taking the initiative. You don't really want to be calling. So just kind of always think, is this hand good enough for me to 3-bet? If not, reconsider. Maybe it's okay for you to get in because you're on the button, speculative hand, etc., but kind of always take initiative when you're playing, when you get into pots. And then for the large stacks, so 40 BB and up, those common mistakes, they're overly aggressive, meaning they're always in hand because they have a lot of chips, they think they can bully. So kind of how you exploit that is just trap and call wider, right? So if you have a good hand, don't let them know. Trap, have the maniac blast off and try to bluff you with their chips because they generally will when they have the big stack. Catch them and then double up. A couple population tendencies. So early stages, players call too wide. Think about it. You have starting stack 10K, blinds are 100, 100. In your mind, I got a lot of blinds. I can see more hands, I can be wider. So players tend to call too wide on that. Make that adjustment if you spot players who do that. Become a little bit tighter when you're there. Value a little bit more. During the mid stages, players play more scared. You're getting towards the bubble. You don't want to be the bubble boy. You have less chips. They're usually in that mid stack range, 20 to 30 BBs. So for those scared players, you can also be more aggressive, right? Take more initiative in the pot. And then late stages, players tend to bluff too little. So that's generally player tendencies. Late stage, people want to keep the chips. They generally don't get their chips in unless they're really confident they can win the pot. But then when you watch some of the pros, you know, a lot of bluffing happens at this stage. So there's different levels to it. And then when you catch players that are bluffing too little, exploit them towards the end. Make sense for the tournament style? So let's say you're on the bubble with a big stack. What is the best exploit? Tighten up to lock for a min cash, call fewer hands, open more pots, and pressure mid stacks, or only play premium hands. See? Exactly, yeah. All right, so if you're on the bubble, you have a big stack, you see that your table is maybe 50% in that mid-range to lower range, you're the largest stack at the table, get super aggressive, win those pots, keep applying pressure, because those chips matter a lot at that point, and they're gonna be playing very, very tight, so you can exploit that type of play a lot easier. So how does fear change player behavior in tournaments? Or how have you seen it? Maybe you even have examples that you guys experienced.
Yeah, overfold.
Overfold's a very common one, yeah. Especially in bigger buy-ins, right? You playing 150 buy-in, it's okay, I'll rebuy. You play 1500, that fear level goes up a notch, right? Vince, what about you? What do you think about fear and player behavior in tournaments? Have you seen it? Have you experienced it? Because you were in Vegas recently.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people overextend themselves way too often. This ties in with bankroll a little bit. They'll overextend themselves, play in a tournament they can't really play. They might have like $1,000 and start playing like $400 lines, for example. So then you can just tell based on how they're playing that they're just like they're just scared to lose their extra stack. To your point, they're just trying to lock it in from like literally the moment they sit down, just try to make cash. And I think when they play scared like that, they're missing a lot of opportunities. So just play aggressive against those players and then just slowly leave it stack.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was, I had a lot of that issue too early on, and you're absolutely right from the bankroll side. If you're playing outside of what you can afford, that fear level jumps up a lot. If you're playing in those that you can afford, you know, you don't really think about it anymore, and it kind of allows you to play your better game. So it happened to me early on when you're buying in these tournaments. But then once you kind of equilibrize and you figure out what's the right buy-ins, that's why online is great. You know, you can kind of apply a lot of these lessons for a $25 buy-in, run up a bankroll, and then do a $200 live tournament, for example. So why can big stacks bully more than they should, quote unquote should?
Because with a larger stack, you're less likely to bust the tournament, but you're pushing around the short stacks, they're like it's all on.
Yeah, so that goes right back to kind of that ICM pressure. So when you're in the money, chips, there's a direct value, a dollar value to the chips, right? So if you have a really big stack, you know, you can apply a lot of pressure than you quote unquote should be doing. It's just it's a profitable kind of exploit. And then when is survival actually a mistake?
That's a really loaded question.
Losing value, I guess, when you're getting stealing blinds.
Yeah, that's a good one. This kind of goes also to the kind of the min cashing mentality. If you're there to kind of min cash, you'll be a lot more conservative in your play when you hit that bubble, right? You'll be a lot more careful. But if you're kind of, I'm here to win, I want to go for broke, you will be a little bit more aggressive. You'll take those 3 bets, you'll shove a little bit more, and then you might double, triple up, and then it brings you to the top 3 is actually what matters for tournaments at the end of the day, right? Min cashing, anything but top 3, because it's such a top heavy payout for these tournaments. You really want to be going for number 1, or you're too passive, essentially. Make sense?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on that previous question, you said on the bubble, what should the big stack do?
You should be applying a lot more pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just say you're under the gun
Mhm.
and you're the big stack, and we have those same multiple choice answers. You know, does that still apply?
That's a great question. So I mean, it really depends on kind of the stack variation at your table. Let's just say you've tagged the next few players as very tight or knit. So you're like, okay, I can open a bit wider because I know they're not going to 3-bet me. Maybe the buttons, maybe the small blind and big blind are very short, right? So you could take the initiative. You can try to steal it with a marginal hand, but don't open like queen deuce under the gun, right? If you have maybe king 9 suit, something that you can at least play, you can. But again, it's very dependent on the players there, the stacks available, what archetypes that you've kind of tagged them as. But you can, right? The large stack, you can afford to fold still. If someone jams and you don't want to call it off, you lost 2-3 blinds, who cares? Yeah, so just a quick summary before we kind of finish off. So exploit versus balance, kind of balance of the GTO, the perfect style. Doesn't really apply unless everyone else is playing GTO. So have it as a foundation, understand why it exists, understand the ranges, but then build upon that with the exploitation play. So adjust to the player mistakes that you see, not just sticking to perfect theory, because perfect theory is never going to work out for you in live poker. Identify and then adjust. So label opponents first and fast. So they're callers, they're folders, they're maniacs, they're scared players, right? They're lags, tags, loose and aggressive. Make those tags early on and adjust your style depending on how they react to your play. Bet sizing is a weapon for you guys. Remember, especially in tournaments. So if they call too much, bet bigger for value. If they fold too much, bluff more, often smaller. Tournaments equals fear equals EV. So these are kind of what we discussed previously. ICM and stack pressure cause overfolding. Big stacks apply pressure. Medium stacks are most exploitable. So it's a couple golden rules. When they call too much, value bet. When they fold too much, bluff. And when they're scared, just attack. Be relentless. Just attack, attack, attack. Any questions? Comments? Concerns?
Yeah, in a smaller tournament, even like this, there's people getting knocked down quickly, you're changing tables, and fewer hands of actually going down to the river. So how are you getting this information if you're not seeing the cards at the end?
So that's a great question. The benefit is also we play, because it's a smaller club and group players, we still get to play with each other quite often. So use everything that, like, I played with Jennifer a couple times. You know, I've taken a couple notes. I know how she plays in certain spots.
Yeah, I
Right, so you just gotta have that.
If there's a familiar person at the table, I understand that.
Well, you just gotta take, it's just, you gotta do with the information what you will at the end of the day, right? And sometimes a lot of player tendencies tend to show with the way they play. You know, when they overcall or they overfold, people tend to stick to those tendencies. So it's also important for you to notice them on yourself and adjust. Keeps the game fun that way. But you're right, it is harder.
Overcalling and overfolding is easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, staying off your phone is a big one. I think this was another thing that I spoke about in tournaments. Like, even if you're not in the hand, watch what the other people are doing. Watch the players in the hand, right? Watch their actions, how they react, if they have any common patterns that they're doing. A lot of people I know, when they're not in the hand, they're just on their phone. You miss a lot of valuable information that way, and it's up to you if you want to be on or off. But I find you pick up a lot of stuff if you just pay attention to folks when they're playing, right?
Who's on the
A lot of people are on their phone when they're playing.
Less so in tournaments. Cash games, for sure.
I mean, yeah, tournaments less so definitely compared to cash, but like when I was in Vegas, every table I was on, I'd say between 25 to 40% of the table would be on their phones, like if they're not in the hand, checking Instagram or doing random stuff, right? Like it's not wrong, people get bored, but you're just missing information. Cool. Yeah, so that's just a little bit on exploitative play. There's a lot more that you can kind of dig into. For cash games, I would say you can watch Hungry Horse Poker, if you guys know who that is. He's a very good cash game player, and he's very good on exploitative play. Great guy to watch. And then for tournaments, I think Negreanu is like a solid exploitative player. He's great at speech play. That's another aspect of the game that I'm not comfortable with at all. Like if I'm in tournaments, I do not talk if I'm in a hand. I'm not answering you. I'm not like, I am not confident enough to open my mouth. But a lot of players, or a couple players I know, you know, they have that gift of the gab. And they've made people fold when they should call, and a lot of, so it's kind of interesting to watch. Anybody else? Kind of stuff that they want to discuss for exploitation or things I missed? Will, you're gonna raise your hand. Just
I want
speak.
to know how far you go with exploiting people. Because sometimes I'll make assumptions about a player, and I take it very extreme. So like as an example, like you'll be on the river, and it's like, I think he's gonna show up here with like just a little bit too weak of a range. So like I'm just gonna shove literally every hand here on this river, because I think he's folding just a little bit too much. But then that gets me into these like stupid spots where I have 7 deuce and I'm jamming the river, whatever. And it looks stupid, but it's just like in my mind, I was like, I actually think this is like a spot where I can, you know, so I'm just curious, like.
Are you profiting in those spots against that player though? Like, do you generally, are you correct when you're making those assumptions?
Sometimes.
More often than not? Because the key here is being more often than not, right? It's not about always being correct. It's not about being correct
Right.
70, it's like 55, 53% of the time you're right. You're at least winning, you know, you're right more often than not.
I mean, that's.
It can be taken a lot for, especially in cash games.
Yeah, I mean, I play like mainly cash over tournaments, but it's
Yeah.
just like, I feel like some of the exploits I go for, or at least I call them exploits, it kind of just looks like punts sometimes. But it's
Yeah.
just like, I'm just wondering how extreme you take your exploits at times.
I think for cash games less so, because cash games, you get into those weird spots and situations. Tournaments, I feel like it's more important to stick to that. But again, it's all about adjusting. If a player is a maniac in a tournament, which I've seen a couple people just be super maniac, that's a different exploit that you kind of adjust to. But yeah, cash games, don't take it too far. Tournaments apply a little bit more. No one else?
I
If
have
not,
an unrelated question, Jack.
yeah, just go ahead.
It's about blinding away. Let's say you're a medium stack and you're vulnerable to exploitation. Big stacks are opening too much. Small stacks are ready to jam anytime. There's ante and everything. Let's say you are anywhere between 25 or 30 bigs. You're not close to the bubble, but you're almost there. Like let's say 6 places up paid, for example, a mini tournament like at VClub, where you are, let's say, 12 or 15 players right now, and you're open to exploitation. I understand that you don't have a mega stack. I know there's a jamming range for 25 bigs as well, but then you get busted as like equally in those spots as well, like despite having a medium stack. So, but if you close your, if you start playing nitty, you're blinding away, you come under sub 15 by the time you're close to the bubble, and then you become the short stack. So, where do you find spots to kind of not have that happen more often than not? Because I find myself in these spots where I'm blinding away, especially when I'm in 25 bigs, and I'm at 12 bigs suddenly, especially with the big blind ante in place and 3 orbits. I'm trying to be tight or wait for nice hands, because again, both sides are having their fun of jamming or opening too wide, so you're obviously crushed.
You're stuck, yeah.
So, any tips there? How do you navigate those spots?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times, most players are going to be in that range at that spot in those timing of the tournaments. Because if you look at just kind of the distribution of chips and the
you're close to
you're
that,
always going to there's going to be the majority of players who are in that 25 to 35,
Right.
and then the outliers who are super. It's hard. It's annoying, those spots. Of course, all the normal rules. That's kind of where I think the GTO side of things come into play a little bit more, because it helps you with a foundation of, okay, I have these many blinds, I should be jamming or 3-betting or 3-betting with this range of hands. It at least gives you a kind of foundation to be confident with. And generally it can work when you're at those stack depths, like if you're jamming and stuff. So apply GTO in those circumstances, but then add the exploitation. If you know the big stack is in, he's last to act and he's gonna call a lot wider just because he wants to knock you out, you can jam a little bit wider too.
Or open a little bit more, like 2.5 or 3.
Exactly, right? So those spots are really annoying when you're in that mid stack towards the money. It's just tricky to play. It's about adjusting, and then, like most people are gonna, there's only one winner, right?
Yeah,
So,
most people are there in those spots as well, because that's pretty much the average stack around those times. So, but I find it hard to step on the nicer side of the
yeah, so that's why I find that an adjustment I kind of made, and this is where, like even at TPP, where I think a couple players have played, is early on, be a little bit more aggressive with your play, put a little bit more value in to get that chip stack higher. So when you hit that mid-level towards the bubble, instead of being between 25 and 35, you're at that 35 to 45 or maybe 50 big blind range, because then you're still comfortable, right? You can still play, you try to keep that average stack always a little bit higher than that 25 to 35. So be a little bit more aggressive early on, take a little bit more risk when the blind levels are lower, because you can risk like losing more blinds, and then adjust as you hit that middle stack, and then when you hit the bubble / in the money, add some ICM. It's a lot to think about when you're playing as the game.
A lot of plays there. One spot is there was a chip leader on the table. I rebuy close to the late reg. I rebuy for 20 bigs. I'm in there. I'm on big blind. Chip leader opens with twice the opening stack is like 60 bigs or 65 bigs. They open standard min raise, and I'm on big blind. Everyone folds. I have king queen off. King queen off is more vulnerable than king queen suited, so I ship it, and then they call with jack 10 suited, and they river a flush better than mine, even despite me having a blocker flush. But because they had 65 bigs, they were kind of comfortable calling with jack 10 suited, which is probably not the worst call, but obviously not a best call as well. But it's the play style, right? That they were a little loose, so they agreed to take that spot. they put me on a lower pair maybe, or even if it's an ace king or ace, ace queen, they still have 40% equity with me. So, do you
Yeah, but
think-
as you said, like, the math is still on your side. So like,
yeah.
at those spots, sure, they suck out or they hit their card that they need, but mathematically, most of the time, you're gonna be winning, what, 64-6?
Yeah, because GTO, POV, I think I didn't do anything wrong. Maybe I could have like raised there. That's the only other possibility. Like 3-bet, slightly committing, almost committing stack, and then maybe they fold. Or if they don't, then I still call, right? Or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, those are
maybe
also
instead of,
player
raise
tendencies.
fold spot, thinking off. Do you think?
It can be. I mean, it's also player tendency, man. If you know that guy is going to be over calling you, that jams, you're profitable.
Yeah, I don't know that because I rebought new table. I see big stack first hand, and I'm like.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're going to win that, but
Yeah, and then later it was
yeah,
over.
it's also results oriented, right? Like if it played out like it just king high won,
Yeah,
then you just
that,
doubled up.
obviously it's part of the game variance, a bit of gambling there as well, so
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Where I think I didn't do more wrong than right in that spot. So.
No. I mean, it's like that's the beauty of this game. It's there's very little clearly defined right or wrong.
Yeah, there's not. The play styles obviously add the flavor.
Yeah, it's like mostly gray. There are generally better things to do and better things not to do, and players tend to kind of follow those patterns. But there's so much gray, right? And that's kind of where you pick up patterns and you try to exploit, and have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, alright.
Right, Sherry?
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it.
It's the
Thank you.
queen of exploitive play right here, Sherry. Huh? Hairy hand. That's it for me. I mean, if anyone else has questions or not, if people can grab some food before we start playing, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor.
Oh, I don't need a round of applause.
Good job.
Sir?